Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Itamar. Let's get right down to our Torah lesson for the week. This week's portion is Bishalach. We are a little late here, but it's never too late to study Torah. And I want to focus, before I get down to the major portion of the lesson, I would like to dedicate this lesson to, we say something in Hebrew called Ilui Nishmat. Ilui Nishmat means the uplifting of the soul. And it's very important when someone passes away to learn to do good deeds, to study Torah, to do good things in this world for the uplifting, and have in mind of a person, you uplift his soul in the world to come. It's an important concept. And here it's a very, it's a difficult opening here to discuss, but I think it's very important to discuss this. This week, we know on this past Shabbat, Ariel Sharon passed away. And everyone knows Ariel Sharon, throughout the years, a tremendous leader, fighter for Israel, general, a person who's done tremendous things for the people of Israel. His whole life, you read his life story, it's been a tremendous devotion and commitment to the people in the land of Israel. I personally remember a story going back was the 10th year celebration of the community of Itamar. This year we're going to be celebrating 30 years, so it's 20 years ago. And I remember my father bought me this video camera. The old-fashioned cameras had a big, the big cartridge in there. It looked like a real TV camera, whatever it was. And Ariel Sharon came over very modest on the side, and I went over to him and said, "Ari, could you please say a few words about the community? And I'd like to have you on record here." And he began to say beautiful things. He spoke about how we are in the front lines, and it's so important, and we can never allow places like Itamar to be dismantled, and it's the most important thing in the world to settle the land. Amazing speech. I have it on tape to this very day. And this was a very special meeting of Ariel Sharon. And again, very modest. And he was a modest man, for sure. Of course, the other side, the pain, the terrible pain that we have is, if we go back just a few years ago, before he had his stroke, obviously, when he was the Prime Minister of Israel. And we'll never forget the terrible tragedy, the nightmare of having thousands of Jews thrown out of their homes, that they were living there for 30 years, some of them, destroying families' livelihood, and uprooting even dead bodies to bury them somewhere else. And this terrible thing that went on. The so-called one-sided peace, I don't know what you want to call it, the one-sided agreement, of evacuation of Gush Katif, in the Gaza region. And this was something that will obviously be never forgotten by the people of Israel, those who, of course, their whole hearts and souls were in building the land and settling the land, and the personal victims that were so, their lives were broken and destroyed to this very day from that terrible act of Ariel Sharon and the government of Israel that, of course, allowed him to do this, to destroy homes and to give away land, precious assets of the land of Israel. Not to put aside those who died, for fighting for the land and buried there, were uprooted from the blood that was spilled to hold on to the land and to fight, defend it, just evacuating and running away, whatever it was. This was something that will never be forgotten. So here you have a man on one side has done great things for the people of Israel. On the other side, he'll be remembered as well for the terrible things he committed, being part of throwing people out of homes. So how do we relate to that, right? It's a very difficult thing, because as an individual person, a person lives a life, and he ups and downs, he makes mistakes. When a person sins, to God, going against the Torah, making, God forbid, doing personal sins that he's not affecting the entire world, but he's affecting himself. That's called a chet prati, an individual, personal sin. On the other hand, God forbid, when a person goes further, and because he took more responsibility in his life of other people, and his particular sin is affecting the masses. He's a person who's a leader. The greater leader you are, the more responsibility you have of other people, and your mistakes could have tremendous repercussions, much more than your own personal, damaging yourself, but damaging many, many other people. And when a person is a leader, that's what we see in the Bible with King Saul. The Talmud says King Saul sinned, and he lost his throne because he sinned against the people of Israel. When he gave in to the demands of Amalek, like giving into the demands, which means he was commanded by Samuel and by God to wipe out Amalek. But what happened? He decided to have mercy on the sheep, on their flock, whatever it was, and on the leader, until eventually, of course, Samuel came and he finished the job. But he lost his throne for this. King David, on the other hand, sinned, a few times, but his sins were more personal. I mean, when he sinned with Bathsheba, for example, he didn't lose his kingship, right? Because he sinned, let's say, on a personal level, but not on a level of affecting the entire nation. So it means if a leader would sin, do something, do something wrong, immoral, personally, that of course is very serious, right? But it's not the same thing as when you are affecting the masses and you're causing a tremendous effect on your entire people. That is much more grave and much more dangerous. So I'm saying you have these two sides. Ariel Sharon. I remember the old Ariel Sharon I look around my community here and how many houses he built over here in Itamar. When he was the minister of how do you say Shikun in Hebrew. I forgot how to say the word in English. Shikun means the housing. That's it. Housing minister. I remember that. I remember meeting, of course, more than one time, and whatever it was. When you saw on a personal level, you saw a man of modesty. That's what I felt when I met him. I thought he was a modest man. He was a leader, charismatic leader, but he was a modest man. But on the other hand, you see the terrible thing happen at the end of his life. And what caused this to take place? Why did he do this for? He was a man who loved Israel so much. Why did he allow people to be thrown out of their homes? And he went against his own party and moved to make another party. He did all kinds of political maneuvers to go ahead and allow this expulsion, expulsion of the Jews out of Gush Katif and the northern Sharon. So why did he do it? What motivated him? Someone who you see as a modest person really cares. And I personally feel his motivation came from pressure. On the outside, he couldn't handle the pressure, although he was a tough guy, whatever it was. Or maybe there are things we don't know, but I personally feel he's motivated by pressure on the outside. And this lesson, this Torah lesson which I'm going to give today, I would like to try to relate to this. Again, this is his Ilui Neshama, to uplift his soul in the upper world, cleanse his soul, rectify his soul, and I want to try to explain it according to this week's portion to maybe find, in my opinion, a very, very strong connection to his passing on this Shabbat, this past Shabbat. So if you can bear with me, let's begin the lesson and we'll see how this comes to play. But before we do so, I'd like to begin opening up by bringing a couple of verses here that seem to be, of course, all be connected in the end, as we'll try our best, but a few verses that seem to be very difficult to understand. If we look and again, we're Parashat Bishalach, we're in the 14th chapter of the book of Exodus, and verse 11, it says, Vayamu el Moshe. The people of Israel, after, of course, right now they're coming out of Egypt and running towards the Red Sea, and they say to Moshe Rabbeinu, Hamibeli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim, lekachtanu lamut b'midbar. Are there no graves in Egypt that you took us to the desert to die? Mazot asita lanu. What do you do to us? The complaints. What do you do to us? Lo tzianu miMitzrayim, take us out of Egypt. Halo zeh davar asher dibarnu elecha b'Mitzrayim leimor. Chadal mimenu v'navda et Mitzrayim. Ki tov lanu avod et Mitzrayim umutenu b'midbar. This is what we said to you in the desert. Let us stay in Egypt. Let us worship. Let us work. Let's be in bondage with the Egyptians. It's better than dying in the desert. So what do you take us out of here for? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, don't be afraid. He calms them down. Don't be afraid. Etc., etc. So here we see a complaint by the people of Israel. And this is a question. Now, why is it a question? Because you see that they experienced tremendous miracles of the plagues against the Egyptians. So what are they afraid of? God is promising. Moshe is leading them. What is this fear that's still in their hearts? That's number one. But let's go on. If we go on to chapter 15, okay. I'm sorry, chapter 16. Where am I up to here? Here we go. Vayomu alehem b'nei Israel. Now this happens when the Jewish people, again, complain to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they're in the desert. This is already after leaving, after getting across the sea. ויאמר עליהם בני ישראל, מי ייתנו מותנו ביד השם בארץ מצרים ושבתנו על שעיר בסייגos. We should have died in Egypt. We were sitting on the flesh pots of Egypt. Verse number 3 again chapter 16, verse 3. B'ochlenu lechem leso, we would eat bread in satisfaction. Ki yotzeitem otanu el hamidbar hazeh lamit et kol hakahal hazeh berav. He took us out we should die of starvation. That's what he took us out of Egypt for. And Moshe says, Hashem says to Moshe, tomorrow I'm going to bring them the man, the famous man coming from the heaven, and the slav, whatever. So again we see complaints again. After not only all the plagues they saw, and after seeing the splitting of the sea, they're complaining where their food's going to come from. Their bellies are bothering them. And now, let's go on a little bit. I'll show you another source over here. It says, if you look in chapter 17, it says like this, Vayisu kol adat b'nei Yisrael midbar Sin. The entire congregation of Israel traveled from the desert of Sin. L'masa'ehem al pi Hashem vayachanu b'refidim, and they camped in Refidim. Ve'ein mayim l'shtot. There's no water to drink. They're thirsty. I'm also thirsty. Vayarev ha'am im Moshe. And the nation complained, and they started to complain to Moshe Rabbeinu, to argue with him. Vayomru tenu lanu mayim v'nishteh, give us water and let us drink. Vayomer lehem Moshe, ma terivun imadi, ma timnaseun et Hashem. Why are you fighting with me? Why are you trying to, why are you trying to, test God? Vayitzmasham, ha'am, and the nation was very, very thirsty. Lamayim, for water. Vayalen am al Moshe, and they complained on Moshe Rabbeinu, vayomu lama zeh leitanu Mitzrayim, why you take us out of Egypt? Lamit oti vet banai vet niknai batzama, to kill us, my children, myself, my flock, to kill us all with thirst. Vayitzma Moshe el Hashem, vayitzak Moshe el Hashem, le'mo ma eseh la'am hazeh od ma'at uskulu. Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, Giv'al, he's yelling, they're going to stone me, what are we going to do? ויאמר השם למשה עבור לפני העם וקח איתם את בני ישראל ומתך שהכית בו את היאור. And Hashem says, take the staff that you struck the yaor, the Nile. And then, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu, it goes on to say, I will stand before you. God says, Shama latzu, on the rock. The horevi kita batzu, and you will hit the rock. وَيَصُوا مِمَّنُ مَاءٍ وَشَرْتَا am, and water will come out, and the nation will drink. Vayaz ken Moshe le'inei ziknei Yisrael, and the nation did so. Right? Vayaz ken Moshe le'inei ziknei. Moshe Rabbeinu supplied, did this whole thing and supplied water in front of the elders of Israel. So first of all, the question I want to ask right away: wow, 3 complaints after seeing the miracle of coming out of Egypt. After the, first the plagues and then the splitting of the sea, and the continuing belly aching, constant complaints. Again, we don't know how difficult this challenge was and this test was for them to be thirsty, to be hungry. But whatever it is, a nation that was done so much for a nation, so much was given to them to take them out of 210 years of slavery. But what is this belly aching all about? Why? That's the question. Do you have any answers over here? Of course, I can't hear you through the screen, but on a simple understanding, which I think is so important to discuss today, it's obvious that leaving slavery, is very, very, it's not only physically leaving slavery. This is what's brought down, of course, by Ibn Ezra, one of the great commentaries, and other commentaries as well. When a person leaves slavery, right? It's not only leaving it on a physical sense, okay? Because you can leave it on a physical sense, right? But their whole mindset, their whole way about them was a slave mentality. And that's something that was very difficult to completely heal them immediately. It was a process of healing and letting them leave the slave mentality. And that's why I think that's one of the ways it comes to, it's a logical solution to this question is how could they possibly, if they're to see the miracles going on and on, but continue for some reason to bellyache and complain if it's not that they're still stricken with the slave mentality that it hasn't left their system yet. And that's why I can give an example. I think we'll give you a couple examples. First of all, today we know that when God forbid there's a abuse going on in the home could be a husband, God forbid, abusing a wife. We hear it all over the place now. Terrible situations of abuse going on in the world. Or children, God forbid, being abused, or bullies abusing other people, individuals, gave last week a lesson of bullies, right? Abuse. But that's very connected, and I want to get back to that point. But abuse is someone who's very afraid. Even a person, sometimes you finally get the guts to make a complaint. Say, help me, this person is abusing me. How many people are being ruled over by others and afraid to stand up for their right because they're afraid. So they are enslaved by those people that are abusing them, and which is frightening. And sometimes you have individuals that don't have the strength. If you have a child that's abused, how can he even complain? He's afraid, right, sometimes. Until finally, God sends him some kind of messenger to see you, to pay attention to this abuse and try to help. But many times a person is going to suffer for many years until he finally gets the strength to come and say, I was abused. I was hurt. Help me. And until you completely shed yourself and have the strength to say to the abuser, go somewhere and stand up for your rights and get away from that, it's a long time. And many times even people that finally get out of that situation takes them, they're still in shock. The situations, many times people don't even want to hear about stories of marriages that didn't work and the abusive spouse, whatever it was, which can work sometimes on both sides, right? Whatever it is, a lot of times they're still so involved in the past, what they went through, the abuse, that they don't even want to rebuild their lives. And they just want to live alone and just so shell-shocked of what happened, of a traumatic experience. And this is a very way of looking at a psychological, going to a little psychology, looking into the situation of the people of Israel being 210 years enslaved, and they can't get it out of their system. Even if they left, they're still afraid, looking over their back every minute. Oh my goodness, they're going to come and get me now. Of course, we saw in the Holocaust with the Jewish people. You have to look at many examples. I can give you tons of examples. And if you look in the story of Shimshon, Hagibor, right? Samson. And I'll never, it so stands out so strongly. Never forget this verse when you look in the book of Judges. And when Samson, again, they come to the people of Judah. And the people of Judah, they're coming to look for Samson. They want to obviously get a hold of him and capture him, because he's fighting against the Philistines. So what do they say to the people? What do the people of Judah say to Samson? He goes, "Don't you know? Don't you know that the Philistines are ruling over us?" Like, he's fighting back, and they say, "Don't you know?" Because they're so, again, when someone's ruling over you and completely in control of you, it's so ingrained in the system. They're afraid. They're really afraid, and they're giving into that. They're not fighting back. And this is what Slave and Tower is all about. So the process of leaving Egypt, there were really 3 stages. One was the plagues, right? The 10 plagues which went on each time, again, striking and punishing the Egyptians. That was the first stage. And then there was a splitting of the sea, which was another stage in itself. The splitting of the sea is different. It's not part of the 10 plagues. What is it part of? The splitting of the Red Sea is something unusual, that here the Jewish people are walking through, on one hand, they're going through, and the Egyptians are going through, but for the Jewish people, it's Yabasha, it is dry land. The Egyptians go through and it becomes their grave. It's very interesting, this whole process of what does that symbolize? The water process, the on one hand being for the Jewish people one side and for them being another side. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. And then finally, the third stage is receiving the Torah, which is a tremendous revelation of the entire nation of Israel, receiving the 10 Commandments, which was only the 10 Commandments, of course. The entire Torah Moshe Rabbeinu receives on the mountain. But this was we call Mamad Har Sinai, receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. And what does this all mean? And the answer is that God slowly was cleansing the people of Israel, trying to shell off, put off these shells, and say, listen, okay, you saw the plagues, God punished the Egyptians over here, and that was the first way of educating them that God is going to be with you, He's going to stand with you. But it wasn't enough. The splitting of the sea was much greater, because here you saw for themselves. God says the Jewish people saw them, right? They were drowned right there, so they saw their oppressors be eliminated completely. So they were completely at that moment nullified physically from the bondage. That moment when they were completely swallowed up in the sea, the Egyptians, they were what's it called? Let out of this world, or brought into their grave over there. At that moment, the people of Israel saw that they were free. So that really helped completely realize why your oppressor is no longer in the world. But then the third stage still wasn't over yet. The complaints keep coming because, again, they're still in a mentality of being oppressed, of not wanting to not wanting to do something about their situation, and constantly just when a person is a slave, you saw it a lot of times in the Holocaust. People trying to get a piece of bread, fighting for a piece of water, fighting for this. And I've been thinking about spiritual, parts of their lives and what they have to do in the future what is the goal in life. People are still in that mentality, and that's where the Torah comes in to correct the way of thinking, to purify from the inside of how we're supposed to think and how we're supposed to behave. So it's a process, again, of education. In the same way we see many times, in life, we see when you raise a child. You raise a child in the beginning, a child, all it wants in this world is to receive, right? When a person comes in this world, his hands are closed like this. Give me, give me, give me. When a person leaves this world, it's like that. His hands are open because what did I do? Instead of what did I take, what did I give him? To others, I mentioned this before. And that's exactly it. The nation of Israel comes to the land, and they eventually become givers because that only happens in the land of Israel. And they become a nation to fight for the land and to give of themselves, to sweat. But in the desert, the condition of being in the desert for 40 years, the man came down. They were still like children, being nursed. They were literally being nursed. The clothes were given to them. The food was given to them. They were children. They only had to say, give me, give me, give me. And when they didn't get the give me, give me, give me, they complained. Why me, why me, why me? But eventually they would be turned into givers. And that's what, of course, when we educate. But the nation was being educated on a very, very deep sense. Educated. Slowly to become a nation. Now, what's absolutely amazing is that this nation that's complaining, gimme, 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 and complaining all the time with belly aching, is a nation of Skulat Yisrael, a nation that shows the people of God to be a nation, a light to the nations. Wow, but you started with a slave nation. And this slave nation, so you don't see it on the inside. You don't see it on the outside because you just see a bunch of complaints. But on the inside, talking about tremendous inner power, people of tremendous souls within here. These are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These are the children that are going to enter the land and receive Torah, enter the land and build a land of Torah. So within them they have tremendous potential which you don't see. And this is very reflected on the splitting of the sea. Now, why is it reflected on the splitting of the sea? Because it's brought down in our sources. I think the Baal HaTanya brings it down, is that the land, you see a distinction. When someone's standing on a piece of land, you could see that he's standing there, and you can see the distinction between the person and the land, right? He's sticking out, he's standing up, right, on the land. You see the land, you see the person, but you don't realize that he's living off the land, or he's getting it from the atmosphere, from the air. On the other hand, in the water, when you're inside the water, fish and all the life that goes on in the sea, if the minute you take that thing out of the sea, it dies, right? A fish can't live out of water. So the point is that it's constantly connected to its source, and you feel that. Now, us going in through the water, splitting of the sea represents that the way we walk through the sea is the way we walk on dry land. We always have to remember that we're connected to the source. It's like being inside the womb, being inside of connecting to that source. And that's why it says, it's brought down in Midrash, which is difficult to understand. The angels came along and said, what's the difference between these people and these people? They're both idol worshippers. And the point is that on the outside, it looked like there's no difference, right? They're all idol worshippers. But on the inside, of course, was all the world of difference, is that God is showing that the nation of Israel has a tremendous potential. And if you go into the inner sense of what the potential is going to come out, you're going to see a world of a distance, of course. But the point is they were considered, the outside, the angels looked at them because they were looking at external sense. Sometimes you're walking on the land, I don't see the difference. He's walking, right? But I don't see your connection to that land. But when you're in the water and the fish comes out, you see that immediately you're separated from its source. You feel that it can't live. And that's why we have to reach that level. And the people of Israel are interconnected to Hashem in such a way that we have a job to do. We have to show that inner connection we have to bring that connection to the world and bless the world with that connection. And that had to come to being. That had to come out. Now, the fact that the people of Israel was a slave mentality and still connected to their precious constantly made them make mistakes, made them complain. It was very hard to get away from that. And that's why, again, the angels were saying they're worshiping idols, right? What do you mean? Because they're on the same level on the outside, externally. And the point is we have to shed that off, that externalness. And here, I want to bring it back to what I opened up with Ariel, Sharon. I think the fact, what he given to give away Gush Katif and threw Jews out of their homes and all this, the nations of the world are constantly on our heads, constantly pressuring Israel. We must give away and trying to force us to destroy our, unfortunately, to self-destruct. And we are not yet free. The fact that Israel has to give in to demands of the United Nations or the United States constantly, it shows that they have not yet returned to the land in its full sense. We're not free. We have to be strong and find the spiritual strength to say, Hashem, we are with you, and we're going to do what you say. And we're going to follow the Torah, and we're not going to give in to the pressure of the world. What morally is correct is what the Torah teaches us. There's nothing more moral than the Word of God. And, and if the world comes in a false morality, try to convince the people of Israel, the leaders, to give away our assets, to give away our land, to throw Jews out of their homes, that's moral. But that comes from being oppressed. That comes from being oppressed like the bondage of Egypt. And Sharon had to have the strength to pull away from that, and he didn't have that strength. So it shows that he was still part of that slave mentality. But we have to pray to Hashem that the new generation will come, which is beginning, for sure. And this new generation of Israel is going to be strong and take a true leadership and be able to stand up to the world and say, listen, we're a nation of peace. We don't want to war with anybody, God forbid. But it doesn't mean in any way that we're not going to stand up for our rights. And this land was given to us as the people of God, to the people of Israel, our everlasting inheritance. We don't have anything else but the land of Israel. That's our homeland. And we are not going to give in to any demands because it's our homeland. No one gives up their home. No one gives up their homeland for demands. That is oppression. That is immoral. And it's evil. And we have to stand up against that. And that is what the leaders of Israel must reach, that level. But they're not there yet. And all those that give in are still part of that slave mentality of worried about they're still in exile. And we have to be strong and reach this level. This is going to come in the coming years because it's going to come down to a showdown. We're going to have to be strong and rely on Hashem, that Hashem will be there with us. We have to be strong in our faith. That's the only way to overcome. And this is again, so I'm going back again, a tribute to Ariel Sharon in one way, for sure, because this lesson is in his merit that he should have a tikkun, a rectification. And to people understand the mistake the grave mistake that was made in the lives, the thousands of lives and generations that were affected because of this terrible mistake. But to realize where this mistake came from, and that's the way we can rectify it. And when this mistake is rectified, that will be rectification for him. When people of Israel learn to stand up and be strong, and it's not only Ariel Sharon, unfortunately, this is going on for the last generations of one Israeli government giving him more or less, or it started with Begin giving away Yamit. We can't not give in to demands of oppressors. We have to stand up for the rights of the people of Israel. And of course, I would mention, it goes without saying, we're a peaceful people, we never hurt anybody. And those Arabs who want to live in peace in our land, we don't have anything, we never had a problem with that. We have a problem with those who they think it's peace by destroying Israel, throwing Israel out of their homeland. And this we must not let happen. And the world has to be strong and stand up for the truth. But anyway, I love and miss you all. Have a great week. And we'll talk very soon for our next lesson. Shavua Tov. Bye-bye.